In the 21st century, we are witnessing how the dictatorial regimes of Russia, China, and other countries have launched an offensive against democracies worldwide. But where do dictatorships come from? And how do dictators come to power? Why are they so dangerous? And how can this threat be stopped? Let's try to find some answers to these questions in the video. Hello my friends, my name is Artur Rehi. I'm an Estonian military blogger and reserve soldier. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and become a monthly member and buy me a coffee, and I'll be butchering monthly members' names at the end of every video. Let's go. Throughout history, societies have encountered various forms of dictatorships, each with its own characteristics and mechanisms for retaining power. Political regimes based on strict control and suppression of opposition have emerged in different countries and eras, adapting to local conditions. Several types of dictatorships can be distinguished, differing in their methods of governance and power retention. Totalitarian dictatorships completely control all spheres of life, prohibit any form of opposition, and are often accompanied by a cult of personality, such as in the USSR under Stalin, Germany under Hitler, China under Mao, or North Korea under any of the Kims. Authoritarian dictatorships strictly control politics but allow some freedom in the economy and private life, as in Spain under Franco, Chile under Pinochet, or Portugal under Salazar. Military dictatorships are established after coups and are ruled by the military, such as in Egypt or Myanmar. Party dictatorships are built around a single ruling party that bans political competition, as in China, the USSR, and Cuba. Personalist dictatorships are centered around one leader who holds power with the support of the army, party, or special services. For example, North Korea, Iraq under Saddam Hussein, and Libya under Gaddafi. Corporate dictatorships are governed by a group of elites, a military council, business circles, or aristocracy, as in Portugal under Salazar or Saudi Arabia actually. Then there are theocratic dictatorships, and these are based on religion and governed by spiritual leaders, such as Iran since 1979, or the Vatican as the Pope's theocracy. Some regimes may combine multiple types simultaneously. For example, North Korea is both a personalist, party-based, and totalitarian dictatorship. However, despite the diversity of dictatorial models, their emergence has never been accidental. For the establishment of authoritarian rule, certain preconditions always develop. In a healthy democracy with strong economic indicators, the risk of a dictator coming to power is minimal. A properly structured, strong democracy maintains a separation of powers. For example, in Estonia, power is divided in three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. In Estonia, legislative power belongs to the parliament, Riigikogu, which passes laws and oversees the executive power in the form of the government of the republic, headed by the prime minister. The parliament consists of 101 members elected by the people. The judiciary is independent and ensures compliance with the laws. Estonia has created a unique governance system through the widespread implementation of digital technologies. Citizens can monitor parliamentary work online, access legislative acts, track their implementation, and even participate in voting via the internet. The Prime Minister does not have absolute immunity and can be prosecuted even while in the office. But for criminal charges to be initiated, the Parliament, Riigikogu, must give consent. The President mainly performs representative functions. However, the rise in popularity of far-right conservative parties and the decline in trust in democracy are also noticeable in Estonia. Here we come to the first important factor that dictators use to come to power: economic and social crises. My friends, sometimes we joke around in Estonia that it matters more to Estonia who is the president of the United States than who is the president of Estonia. Well, talking about that, Trump agrees to pause tariffs on Mexico and Canada after they pledged to boost border enforcements. This is Ground News, #1 news comparison site of the world, and it's a great tool. There's a difference of agenda on the center, the left and the right, and you can keep an eye on it if you want to. This news is massively covered, and you can see it, 552 news sources. You can see the bias distribution, left 29%, center 44%, and right 27%. And you can see the factuality, which is one of the most important tools. We got 68% high factuality, and something I don't see quite often, which is very high factuality. Wow. This is where I want my news. By the way, a good combo. You can go to the ownership, find any kind of owner you would like your news source to have. For example, 10% independent news. You'll find those news houses, and the 14% high factuality, you find who has independent ownership and very high factuality. Everything is right in front of your eyes to make sure you don't get garbage. Why I cover this story now is because it is very much connected to the well-being of my country, Estonia, part of the European Union that Trump has threatened to tariff the hell out of. But if you don't want to follow this news, then you can make up your own homepage here. Click for you, and here you can make up the topics you want to see. For example, I have Ukraine and Ukraine war. I click them both, and now I only see these news connected to these two topics and nothing else. By the way, my friends, for a limited time, you can get the same plan I use every day for nearly half the price. Just go to ground.news/Artur or scan the QR code on the screen to get their unlimited access Vantage plan for just $5 a month. Or gift it to someone you know and have more informed conversations. Call out one-sided narratives and think critically about stories shaping this world. I only promote brands I vet, and I think you find Ground News as valuable as I do. Thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. Dictators are usually individuals who, under normal conditions of open competition and a healthy society with a stable economy, have no chance. Their main weapon is populism and a certain charisma. For populist ideas to work, they need a fertile ground. A crisis in a country, whether real or artificially created, is the first step on the dictator's path to power. The dictator manipulates society's fears, inflating threats from external or internal sources, and creating an image of an enemy. For example, after World War I in Europe, we saw a rise in the number of dictatorial regimes because the post-war economic crisis in Europe provided fertile ground for the emergence of many totalitarian dictatorships, including an unknown painter from Austria whose surname later became synonymous with the words evil and totalitarianism, and genocide, Adolf Hitler. In Russia, there were its own adventures under communism and the Gulag, but at first the Bolsheviks also promised land to the peasants and factories to the workers. Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany through a combination of political manipulations, economic crisis, mass discontent, and propaganda. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the country was in deep decline. The Treaty of Versailles imposed huge reparations, the economy was devastated, and the political system of the Weimar Republic suffered from instability and frequent government changes. The democratic system was weak and faced enormous problems. The Great Depression of 1929 worsened the situation, causing unemployment and a rise in radical sentiments. The Nazi Party, led by Hitler, capitalized on this discontent, promoting ideas of nationalism, anti-Semitism, and revanchism. People wanted a strong hand to restore order, but such a hand soon began to strangle them. In 1932, Hitler participated in the presidential elections but lost to Paul von Hindenburg. Many believe that Hitler came to power democratically, but this is not entirely true, and his rise to power bears striking similarities to that of Putin. Here, the second factor in a dictator's rise comes into play. the lobbying of the establishment. Hitler's main lobbyists were representative of the German industrial and financial establishment, as well as conservative elites who feared the rise of communism. Wealthy businessmen such as Gustav Grupp and Fritz Thyssen financed the Nazi Party, hoping that Hitler would provide stability, suppress labor unions, and eliminate the socialist threats posed by the communists. Similarly, Putin's rise to power mirrors Hitler in many ways. Initially perceived as an unambitious bureaucrat, he was promoted by Russian oligarchs who sought to secure their interests. Following the economic crisis of 1998 and Yeltsin's declining public support, the establishment saw Putin as a compromise figure. However, once in power, he systematically eliminated his political rivals, subdued the oligarchs, and consolidated authority in his hands. The establishment plays a crucial role in forming dictatorships, as elites often provide future dictators with resources, legitimacy, and influence. Business circles see them as protectors of their interests, the military as a means of national revival, and politicians as tools for retaining power. However, once in power, the dictator removes their influence. We have reached the third important factor in the establishment of a dictatorship: control over the media. Any dictator has their own propaganda department, whose main role is not only to create the image of the dictator as a savior from all troubles and crises, but most importantly to define the internal and external enemies. One of the goals of propaganda is to ignite hatred and direct it against groups of people whom the authorities define as enemies of the people. In the Third Reich, it was the Jews. For Russia, it has always been the West, led by the United States, but in reality, literally the entire world. For populists in the West, it is migrants, and now also Ukraine. But the common feature of all dictatorships is the persecution of political opponents. Propaganda starts labeling people, directing society's anger against those deemed a threat. Often, under dictatorships, society becomes militarized in an attempt to consolidate the nation and redirect anger towards fabricated external threats. Under the pretext of protecting the state, dictatorships pursue aggressive foreign policies, often leading to wars. Modern dictatorships have gained a powerful weapon: the internet. This allows them to spread their influence like never before. The ability to buy advertising time for their materials enables them to achieve an enormous audience reach, while the lack of moderation on many internet platforms only gives them more freedom. The ability to manipulate algorithms and promote content beneficial to them is a very dangerous trend. Russian and Chinese propaganda have reached an unprecedented scale and only continue to strengthen their positions. The Kremlin realized 20 years ago that investing in information warfare is far more profitable than building missiles, while the Western world has yet to take serious countermeasures. Legislation has failed to keep up with the rapid development of technology and the growing influence of internet giants. It is now 2025, and only now are we beginning to understand the scale of the hybrid war and the fact that agents of influence from the Kremlin and China have found themselves in many leading positions in government and the media in the West. The division within the democratic world paves the way for radical politicians. Hatred and lies are being normalized, and populists, with their eloquent speeches, promise to take control of the situation, earning political points for themselves. The establishment of media control in dictatorships always goes hand in hand with the harassment and elimination of political competitors, which can be called the fourth factor in the establishment of a dictatorship. All those who do not fit in the own category of the dictatorship are declared enemies. The dictatorial regime thus eliminates the separation of powers and concentrates all power in its own hands. Political competitors become scapegoats for all previously arising crises, and while public anger is directed by the propaganda towards internal enemies, The dictatorship establishes control over the legislative and executive authorities, subjugating the parliament, Congress, or any structures performing the functions of a legislative body in the country. At the same time, the judiciary is subordinated to the dictatorship by appointing judges loyal to the regime. Corruption of power is a hallmark of any dictatorship. At this point, the country's constitution is often rewritten in direct violation of its own principles. Harsh repressions and persecutions of opponents begin. Politicians and media workers who oppose the dictatorships are fired and often arrested under fabricated pretexts. Various groups of people declared internal enemies are deported or imprisoned. Not every dictatorship builds concentration camps like Nazi Germany or the USSR, but all regimes resort to various forms of mass repression. Modern dictatorships often act more covertly, using isolated prisons, psychiatric clinics, as was the case in the late USSR for dissidents, or preventive arrests. For example, in Belarus under Lukashenko and in Russia under Putin, the opposition is repressed through criminal cases, assassination attempts, and forced exile, but they do not establish camps in the usual sense. After eliminating the opposition, dictators begin repressions against those who brought them to power. These people pose a significant threat to the regime because they possess a great deal of insider information that could expose the dictatorship's lies and reveal the behind-the-scenes struggle and legal violations. These people know the weaknesses of dictators and can expose the regime. Moreover, they have certain political weight. The establishment and lobbyists who helped the dictator to rise to power, in his eyes, hold too much influence and often dictate the terms. Hitler, for example, having received support from Germany's conservative elites, soon eliminated their influence. In 1934, during the Night of the Long Knives, he crushed the SA stormtroopers led by Ernst Röhm, who had helped him seize power, as well as political allies such as Kurt von Schleicher. Stalin, after coming to power in the USSR, gradually destroyed the old Bolsheviks who had supported him in his struggles for leadership, organizing the Great Purge of 1936 to 1938. Zinoviev, Kamenev, Bukharin, Yezhov, and Yagoda, all of them were eliminated by Stalin, along with tens of thousands of other officials, generals, and officers. In China, during the Cultural Revolution, party officials who had helped Mao retain power were destroyed, and the old cadres were repressed. In Cambodia, Pol Pot's regime completely eliminated the elite, including even its own supporters suspected of disloyalty. In North Korea, after coming to power, Kim Jong-un executed influential generals and party officials, including his own uncle, Yang Song-tak. In Iran, after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini eliminated both political allies and leftist groups that had helped him overthrow the Shah. Saddam Hussein in Iraq followed a similar path, eliminating both party officials who had helped him seize power. After the purge of the elite and the establishment of media control, the dictatorship begins to tighten the screws. The influence of the secret police grows. The secret police play a key role in any dictatorship, ensuring control over society, suppressing opposition, and protecting the regime from internal and external threats. It acts as an instrument of terror, eliminating political opponents, monitoring citizens, and manipulating information. In Nazi Germany, the Gestapo was responsible for identifying enemies of the regime. In USSR, the NKVD and later the KGB eliminated real and perceived enemies of Stalin, organized assassinations abroad, for example, of Trotsky in 1940. In East Germany, the Stasi created one of the most effective surveillance systems where any citizen could be an informant and dissidents faced arrests and brutal interrogations. In Chile, under Pinochet, The DINA, the National Intelligence Directorate, kidnapped and eliminated dissidents, conducting operations even abroad. In Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, the Mukhabarat eliminated political opponents, while in North Korea, the Ministry of State Security conducts mass purges, sending people to concentration camps. In Russia, this role is performed by the FSB, which inherits the methods of the KGB and NKVD. Inside the country, the FSB conducts mass surveillance of citizens, controls the internet, fabricates criminal cases against the regime critics, and organizes repressions. The FSB operates not only in Russia, but also abroad, carrying out kidnappings, assassinations, and intimidation operations. Russian agents work in diplomatic missions, and through secret networks of influence agents in Europe and the US, monitoring immigrants and activists. In modern China, the Ministry of State Security, MSS, fulfills the role of the secret police, responsible for surveillance, cyber espionage, and operations abroad. Inside the country, the MSS employs a system of total surveillance, mass arrests, and re-education camps, particularly targeting Uyghurs, Tibetans, and pro-democracy activists. The influence of China's secret police has long extended beyond its borders, actively engaging in kidnappings and persecutions of dissidents even on the territory of democratic countries. China also employs a tactic of forced return through pressure of families, intimidation, or threats of financial and legal persecution. Dissidents are forced to voluntarily return to China. Through a network of secret police stations opened in Europe, the US, and Canada, Chinese agents monitor immigrants and activists. In 2022, such illegal Chinese police centers were discovered in Spain and the Netherlands, where people were coerced into voluntarily returning. All those secret services operated in similar principles: gathering compromising material, intimidation, physical coercion, and information control. Without them, dictators could not hold on to power, as it is the secret police that create the atmosphere of fear and eliminate the possibility of open resistance. Fear is the primary foundation of which dictatorships rests. By exploiting fear, it comes to power, and then through fear, it controls society. The Western world made a huge mistake by opening markets to countries like China and Russia. The dictatorial regimes of these countries were able to accumulate enormous wealth, which they now use to destroy democracies around the world. Modern technologies have opened up unprecedented opportunities. The tactic of soft power and the use of internet allow them to strengthen their influence in the daily lives of Europeans and Americans. TikTok has become the primary source of information for teenagers and young people around the world, enabling Russia and primarily China to undermine trust in democracies and spread communist propaganda. Fake videos about the beautiful life in China and how it surpasses life in the West install distrust in the democratic system and weaken it. This is how modern propaganda machinery gently operates, and Russia has become the main sponsor of radical politicians in Europe and America. Russia creates crises, such as migration or energy crises, and then sponsor populists who promise a way out of these crises. Immigrants, high inflation, aid to Ukraine, and military expenditures have become favorite topics for political manipulation in Europe. The FSB actively operates in the Middle East and even controls many migrant routes, transporting them to Europe for money. Additionally, since the beginning of the full-scale war in Ukraine in 2022, 13 FSB agents have been detained while attempting to cross the US border from Mexico. Where there is a crisis, there is the FSB, or rather, where there is the FSB, there is a crisis. At the same time, the Kremlin financially supports populists who appear before the public, promising stability, prosperity, and solutions to all problems. Democracies are losing in the information war because the amounts allocated for countering disinformation are dozens of times smaller than what Russia or China spends. In Russia's 2025 budget, about 1.42 billion is allocated for state propaganda. China invests billions, and it is impossible to name the exact figure. The European Union and the United States are making efforts to counter disinformation. In 2018, it was reported that EU planned to allocate 1.1 million annually for 3 years to combat Russian disinformation. In 2020, the European Commission allocated 4 million euros to these purposes. Additionally, in 2019, a plan was presented to increase the budget of the EU's Foreign Policy Department for combating disinformation. The United States, in 2018, allocated $40 million to counter propaganda and disinformation from Russia, China, and Iran. In 2020, United States authorities directed $290 million to counter Russian influence and $300 million to counter Chinese influence. This is not enough. The weak response from the West has allowed dictatorships to thrive. Only a decisive response, strength, unity, and the absence of fear can stop dictators. Fear is the main weapon. Russia has managed to intimidate the US and the EU with the nuclear threats, which is why the war in Ukraine has been going on for 3 years. With proper assistance, Russia could have been stopped back in 2022, in fact, even earlier, much earlier. To stop the advance of dictatorships, democratic forces in the West must unite, but so far we only see greater division. This creates a dangerous situation worldwide, and storm clouds are gathering not only over Ukraine, but also over the Baltic states, Taiwan, and South Korea. Democracy must be fought for. And if we do not do it now, it will only become more difficult later. Ukraine has taken the main blow, and they understand the price of freedom. The West has forgotten it. It is time to wake up. My friends, thank you for watching, and now I would like to devote a minute for me to butcher with my Estonian pronunciation some monthly members of Buy Me a Coffee. Stephen Parsons, Someone, James Hall, Kevin Patrick Moore, Pontus, Andres Pius. Damn, we got an Estonian name over the years. One Estonian. Hey, welcome. Thank you, my friends. If you like the channel, subscribe to it and become a monthly member and Buy Me a Coffee. And be sure to be back for the next video. Until then, bye-bye.